the DFS agent that I was working with said, Adrian's a cop and he can keep you safe. And that little girl crawled over and she sat on my right foot. And I looked down at that girl and she said, you can keep me safe. And I looked her in the eyes and I said, I promise I'll keep you safe. Mm-hmm. And at that point, I wasn't going to break that promise. I was not going to break that promise to that girl. And I went to the ends of the earth to keep that promise. And it still is the most egregious child sexual abuse case that I had completely consumed my career in this. But they asked me that and I'm like, I can't answer any of that. Like, I can't talk about like the interview that I just did. I can't talk about any of these things. And the only thing that came out, and people still make fun of me today. I said, well, I caught a badger. Like I saw something in that man that I didn't understand, but I thought, man, how do I get that in my life?
Hey there, and welcome to From the Ground Up Show, the show where we encourage and inspire the next generation of free-thinking leaders by telling the stories of those that have been there, done that, and are still getting it done, building a life that they love with their hearts, their hands, and their hustle. I'm your host, Erick Loden. If you guys enjoy the content, please help me out. Like, share, follow, subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, YouTube, or on social media. If you can take a moment and leave us a 5-star review or leave a comment on your favorite platform to listen on, that helps a lot getting the content out there, moving us up in the algorithms. And you can always check out our online merch store, shop.fromthegroundupshow.com. We have a lot of cool merchandise there with the logo on it and some common sayings. There's a few fun items that you might not find anywhere else. So today, this is going to be a fun one for me. I am joined in the studio by Adrian Keeler. Adrian is a 20-year law enforcement veteran currently serving as a sheriff's deputy in Johnson County, Wyoming. His career has spanned both police department and sheriff roles. He has filled roles such as armorer, firearms trainer, investigator, student resource officer, and others. Adrian is an avid outdoorsman, a father of 3 boys, a devoted husband, and a follower of Jesus. And as of a few weeks ago, Adrian is a candidate for sheriff in Johnson County. Adrian has been a close friend of mine for more than a decade, and there is no one else I would trust more to protect my family and my community in law enforcement. So, Adrian, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Well, we start every show just getting to know you a little bit. So do you mind telling us a little bit about your childhood, your background? What was life growing up for you?
Sure. So our family moved to Casper, Wyoming when I was 3 years old. I always tell everybody that I'm not a native, but I got here as soon as I could walk. And so growing up in Casper, Wyoming, came from a very loving home. Father was a principal and mom was a teacher. I have one other brother, an older brother, and I really had that's kind of where I started my original kind of draw to outdoors. I found myself at a super young age, before it was actually, cool, fly fishing the North Platte River, and I lived fairly close to it. So I went down and, even as a, 10, 11-year-old, I had a really close friend. And we would go down and fish. And I think I fished that river for probably 2 years before I even hooked a fish. It was quite the endeavor. But in that, I just really dove into the love of tying flies. I started my first job when I was 13 at the Ugly Bug Fly Shop. And I think the only reason the owner at that time hired me is because every day after school, that's where I would stop. And he just got frankly irritated of a 13-year-old kid just standing around all the time. He's like, why don't you tie flies or do something? So actually I started to commercially tie flies, just some simple patterns, but really became pretty good at tying flies, even at a young age. And by the time I was 15, he was actually charging adults and other professionals to come in, and I was giving fly tying demonstrations and teaching classes at 15. So I still do that today, not as much. That kind of led into just love for the outdoors. Like every time, all through high school and even to today, that was always my kind of place to go to kind of get reset. So I absolutely love God's creation, God creating Wyoming. Like it's my favorite spot. So in high school, I was an athlete.
When I was working on a roof all day, every day, sweating in the hot sun, I was always frustrated that my clothes really didn't get clean. They would be stiff and uncomfortable to wear. The smell came back after just a few moments of wearing them. Even in a drawer, they would start to smell musty in a very short period of time. So I wanted to tell you about my new partner, Athlete Fresh. Athlete Fresh isn't your typical detergent that covers up smells with strong fragrances. Athlete Fresh dives deep into the fabric to break down the enzymes in sweat that produce that terrible smell. It rinses clean with no residue left behind. No more stiff clothes and no more smell. Check them out, athletefresh.shop/FromTheGroundUpShow.
Played football primarily. I would say I was good at it. I wasn't the best by any means, but I definitely was what I lacked in physical ability. I think I brought just the complete mental thought process that I'm just not going to quit. And so I think that really helped. It's just always kind of how I've been. So that shifted. I had a major event in my life in 1994, in the summer of 95. I was water skiing out of Alcova and had an accident and just completely disassembled my left knee, to include my artery, which I didn't understand. I was with a bunch of my buddies. We were on a boat and everyone's like, "Ah, yeah, just brush it off." And I, of course, tried to do exactly that. And about, 20 minutes into it, my calf was as big around as my thigh, just because all the blood was in it, and ended up driving myself to Casper. This is pre-cell phone stuff. So pulled up to my house. My mom came out. Long story short, 13 or 14 surgeries later, was walking and everything else. And I really had the goal at that season of my life that I was going to play. Like the next step for me was to go to college and play football someplace. I mean, not anything. I wasn't setting my goal at a Division I scholarship, but I was that was my segue into college. So the rug was kind of pulled out from underneath me.
Yeah. I think that attitude of never giving up is pretty prevalent among successful people. I hear that from people I interview all the time, and that's something I see in myself. You're not always the best at it, but one of my favorite quotes is, what is it? A man that will not quit cannot be defeated, or I'm screwing that up. It's something like that. But yeah, just that drive to never give up, to keep going no matter what. That competitive edge. You'll put me in a body bag before I'll let one of them beat me. Like the competition may kill me, but I won't lose it.
To carry on with the story, I'm going to tell you about the first time that I, with that attitude of not giving up has definitely been the baseline in a lot of things that I've done. This season of my life, I had completely given up. I busted my tail trying to get back to being able to walk and I had 1 year to get back into the direction that I wanted to take my life, or the direction I thought my life needed to go. And so I really did. I busted my tail, but I never could get back to where I was. I was never as strong. I wasn't as fast. And I didn't play my senior year in football. And that really set me back. I mean, that defeated me. Like I'm not going to say I gave up, but I dang sure crossed my hands and pouted, for a large season of my life. It's honestly the worst season of my life was that, around my senior year in high school and through the years in college. So, I signed up for Casper College and just went to community college there and was just kind of going through the motions and, trying to self-medicate and, just made a lot of choices that I'm not, terribly proud of. But I can also say that looking back now, I wouldn't change a bit of it, because that was really instrumental in showing me that I needed a savior. Like, and because, I was 18 years old and bulletproof. And then all of a sudden life happened, and I'm like, well, I've got to shift, but I didn't know how to shift. I just didn't. And through those, I don't know, you think about, man, I'm a good guy. And it's always the standard, right? Of like, you never really look internally. You look at everybody around you and you're like, I'm not that bad. I'm not that bad. And so
it's usually not even the people around you. It's usually the worst you can find. I'm not as bad as that guy.
Yep. And so, yeah, the easiest guy to lie to is always looking at you in the mirror, And so that was kind of the season of my life there. And it was definitely a struggle. I ended up going back to kind of what the main draw of my life, which was the outdoors. And that was kind of where I was trying to go get reset, and found myself fishing and hunting a lot, which at the time there was one outfitting business on the North Platte River. So I got hired on with him. I was one of the first 5 original fishing guides to float up and down the river, which was nice. I mean, there was literally, maybe a half dozen to 10 boats on a busy day.
And that's for fishermen and trout fishermen, that's a pretty significant thing. For the audience that isn't fishermen or doesn't know what the North Platte is, can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, it's a world-renowned fly fishing destination. It's the fish population in the North Platte River stretch from below Alcova down even into the town of Casper is just it's a phenomenal fishery. And so it's a destination oriented place for a lot of fly fishermen throughout the world.
Yeah. I remembered that quote. It's a man that will not be defeated cannot be defeated. I had it butchered earlier, but to have a significant injury kind of changes your life, the direction of your life, puts you into a bit of a depression, a spiral downward, kind of going through the motions at college, working as an outfitter, fly fishing on the North Platte. How do you get from there to a law enforcement career? Were there any other jobs in between?
Not really. I met a girl, and that was that was a big transition. No, and I met Kathy. She was going to college in Casper, and we started to date, and we dated a long time. And I was always like working in this seasonal industry, like being a fly fishing and hunting guide. You have to, you don't get sick days. You don't have time off. It's just, if you want paid, you work. And so you're really trying to take a year's worth of income and cram it into a couple of seasons of, 7 months or 8 months out of the year. And so I was gone all the time. Like I would show up at night at, after the sunset and get up way before the sun rose to get out there to take clients. And so you would have to intentionally like take a day off to go do something. And then in my mind, I'm like, well, I'm missing out on making money today. So that was kind of that was where I was at. I still do. I love to teach. I love to share things that I'm passionate about with others. And I mean, even as a youngster tying flies, like I was just passionate about that and love to teach and to demonstrate and to watch people succeed in things that I helped them with. So being a fly fishing guide, I know it probably has a stigma of not being a hard job, and there's a lot of positives to it. I mean, it's fun. You're outdoors all day, but the other positive or the negative is you're outdoors all day, and it's, you're rowing a boat, 15 to 20 miles a day. And most of that let's say you float from Alcova down to the next access point out. I think it's 11 miles. Myself and a couple other guys actually tracked it one day, and the average we would row the boat would be, plus 6 miles, which means that you're going 5 miles back upstream. So yeah, the program is you float down a spot, you row back to the top of it, you float down a spot, row back up to the top of it. So yeah, I mean, it's physically demanding work. But you also have to be a teacher. You have to be able to handle adult temper tantrums. And, so you're a counselor, you're a teacher. I mean, you're stuck at your office is, 16 feet long, and you have 2 people in it, and so you don't necessarily get to pick the people that are going to be sitting next to you. So it has its challenges, but I always really enjoyed that. And same with guiding hunters. Kathy was from Buffalo, and I can't remember the conversation. We hadn't been married yet, but she's like, I see you during the summer about 4 days a month. So why don't you just drive the hour north? And because she wanted to get back to Buffalo. And, so she was living in Buffalo, and I was living in Alcova, and then would commute on my days off and come back up. And then during the wintertime, I would come up and hang out in Johnson County and really get to enjoy that part of the state. And so we were married and in 2004, and I was kind of going through the motions of always applying for different jobs in Buffalo. But as you know, there's not a huge, even back then, there was not a huge job force, that you couldn't find places. So you'd go through the listing and there's 3 jobs. And so one of them came up for the Buffalo Police Department as a police officer. And my initial reaction was, I don't know if that's the right thing for me. But I also knew that I wanted my marriage to succeed. I wanted to have a family. I didn't want to raise them in Casper. And Buffalo just seemed like, back then, I don't know what it was, but like I would hit KC in the wind. I don't know what the wind stops. And then you get there and you're just like, man, I can stand upright. This is amazing. Like, I can't believe this type of Eden is this close to Casper, Wyoming, where it's just always, 50-mile-an-hour winds. So I really did enjoy that aspect, and just the country and Kathy's family's from here. They have a ranch in between KC and Buffalo. And so I would show up and I'd just help her father and brothers out on the ranch during the wintertime. So I really enjoyed that aspect, and I was really trying to get some traction in Buffalo, but I just didn't know how or where. And so this opportunity came along, and I put my application together.
And I know you've told me before that, when you were in your teen years in college, that people that knew you then, law enforcement was probably the last thing they would expect you to do. How did that come about? You said you saw the opening and applied, but what was the thought process? Maybe what was the emotion diving into law enforcement?
I did have some interactions with law enforcement, nothing crazy, but I mean, I would say it was probably not wildly abnormal from, your 19 or 20-year-old college kid. But I specifically remember a time, and I had a Casper PD officer I was dealing with him. I'd done something wrong, and it wasn't like, it didn't have anything to do with anything bad. It was a traffic ticket. Like, I just got pulled over for speeding. I was driving like a 19-year-old boy, and so he pulls me over, and it was just the whole interaction was, I just felt like it was condescending, like he was talking down to me. And I kept thinking to myself, like, I can't deny the fact that I was speeding. I mean, that's not the issue at hand. But I left that interaction just seething because of the way that he treated me. And so when this application process came up for the Buffalo Police Department, I'm like, I can absolutely step into that role and do that, because I do have kind of a guide between what's right and what's wrong. And I feel like that I have even back then, I felt like I had some discernment about, how to, listen to people and then come up with a solution to a problem. Like, that's just been part of my character since I was a little kid. A problem solver, or try to be a problem solver. Sometimes I didn't, but so that was really the driver behind even sending that application in, is like, I'm going to see if I get this and I get this opportunity, I'm going to be a law enforcement officer that can enforce the law, hold people accountable, but still treat them with dignity. And have I done it every time? Absolutely not. I mean, there are some times where I have walked out of a interview or an interrogation with somebody that's just done something horrific. And, I'm a human being, and my initial thought process is just maybe anger, maybe hurt, maybe whatever. But I've always tried to hold myself to the standard of not being condescending and try to treat people with respect. And so that's kind of the motivation. One, just a need for a job in Buffalo, Wyoming. And two, I thought, I could do that job. I think I could treat people fair and kind and step into that role. So I applied, and they gave me a shot, which, during the testing process, I think there was 11 people that were testing for 2 positions, and which has really shifted now. It's hard to get people that actually want to go into law enforcement and step into that arena. But back to my leg, I hadn't done a lot of exercise, I had been exercising, but just like running and on my leg, it just weird. But so you'd show up, you do in the testing process, you'd go through a physical exam, and then you'd go through, a written test. And then if you pass those, then you go on to an oral board, and then you'd go to a psychological exam, and et cetera, et cetera. And so the very first test we had to do was a physical examination, which is a law enforcement standard for the state, where they said you have to meet a certain parameter. And I hadn't ran since my knee had been blown out, Yeah. I was always like on ellipticals or things, but I worked out, but I just didn't do that portion of it. And I didn't prepare at all. It was just, I went up one day and jumped into the pool, and you have to do push-ups, sit-ups, and a run. And I did the run, and I did not do well at all. They actually told me on the way around, you have to run 1.5 miles. And I came around the last lap, and they're like, it's fine. Let's just go in and start this stuff. And I said, I'll be back. I said, I'll be right with you. And I ran that last lap. And so that's just how I was. Like, I set out to do 1.5 miles, and I was honestly, I was embarrassed because I had not ran. I had not actually put my body into that before. And my knee, it was miserable. But anyway, that was just the approach I took to that. Like, they can kick me out. Honestly, I thought they were going to kick me out because I was a solid minute past the standard. And we went through the oral board and I went to the written test, took the written test, went through the oral board, and I thought that was it. Back to guiding. I could tell Kathy, hey, I tried. There's three job openings in Buffalo, and I applied for one of them that I thought would be a career and didn't get it. So I'm back to fishing,
I want to take a moment to tell you about this episode's sponsor, MacArthur Company. As a former contractor, I know the importance of working with a great team. That team includes more than your employees. You need what you need on time and at the right location. Competitive pricing sure helps too. A good relationship with your supplier can make a huge difference. That is why I always use MacArthur Company. At MacArthur, you are more than just a number. You are a person, a customer, and a friend. With branches throughout the United States, MacArthur is big enough to handle your most demanding needs, but they do it with small-town service. MacArthur isn't another big box store run by a board answering to stockholders. They are employee-owned, making them one of the last independent suppliers, serving all of your commercial, industrial, and residential building envelope needs. Whether you're doing roofing, insulation, HVAC, or siding, MacArthur has you covered with great service and a personal touch. If great service and good pricing don't win you over, make sure you check out their customer incentive program, where every purchase earns points towards a free vacation. I am already packing for my next MacArthur incentive trip. Call or check online to find your nearest MacArthur warehouse so you too can enjoy superior service and start earning points towards your next vacation. Get what you need, when and where you need it. All the service without the hassle. MacArthurCode.com.
And they called me and said, "Hey, do you want the job?" And I'm like, well, I guess so. And so really with I remember I was, just a lot of prayer over it. And just, I didn't feel like it was the right thing to do, but I just felt compelled that if I didn't do it, it was the wrong thing. And in the back of my mind, that fear of like, I know I have to, I know I have to pass the Wyoming Law Enforcement Academy, and it's the same standard that I just failed, and again, I just got to work. I mean, I just started to run and lift, and because I knew I was confident in my all my other skill sets, but my knee had definitely changed things physically. So I just got to work and went to the academy in 2006, passed the academy, passed the run, passed all the stuff. While I was there, I messed up my other ankle, and anyway, but yeah, that was kind of the start of the career, and stepped into patrol space with Buffalo Police Department.
Yeah. So can you take us through your career development? I mean, a brand new hire at the PD, you're kind of the low guy on the totem pole. And I know you worked your way up to sergeant in the PD and then made the step over to the sheriff's department. Can you walk us through what does a law enforcement career look like? What is the assignment given to the new guy, and how do you progress in that system?
Sure. So as a patrol officer, you started and you were working. So back then, we didn't have there's a program called a field training officer, and that is after you get out of the academy, you sit alongside a veteran of the agency, and there's a certain standard that is set. Then you go through different aspects of the job, and just to make sure that it's not just book smarts, but you can actually apply it in intense situations, and so you're kind of always under the microscope. So back then that we didn't have an FTO program, and matter of fact, I worked shift work before I even went to the academy. So that is just a different era. I remember, working nights. Of course, I mean, you get the worst shift they can possibly give you to make sure that you really, really want the job. And I remember 3:00 in the morning, everybody went off duty. I'm like, wait a minute, I'm by myself. I have no real knowledge to draw from other than what kind of the mentality, you need to have some knowledge base to draw to make decisions. Like use of force, for example. I mean, I had no intimate knowledge of, how to apply or use force. And so luckily we skated through that and everything was fine, and went to the academy, graduated the academy, came back, and the program was just right around with the guy that I was going to replace. And yeah, I rode around with him for a couple of weeks, and then it was off to the races. They just kind of plop you in a spot and tell you to be a cop. And so there's a lot of different aspects of the job, right? I mean, you can make it whatever you want. And obviously responding to calls, everything from barking dogs to, domestic violence to bar fights. Early 2000s, we had a really large methane population, and it was a little rowdy back. It was rowdier then, just overall, than it is today. I remember, it was just expected that on a Friday night and a Saturday night, we were going to one of the bars and dealing with an issue, so, yeah, just jumped in and did that, and I always wanted to, also was proactive in my approach. Sometimes when it was calm, like I would, at 3:00 in the morning, two reasons. One, I was tired but I would walk downtown and rattle the doors to all the businesses just to make sure that they were locked or someone didn't break into them or whatever. Just to be a little proactive about things. And, I made traffic again, like I covered earlier. As a 19-year-old, I'd like to say I'm a really good driver, but I mean, back then, according to the law, maybe I wasn't.
I draw a distinction. I make this point with my wife all the time. I'm a very skilled driver. It depends on how you define good. Do you drive undistracted all the time and follow all the traffic laws? That's probably not me, but I'm a very skilled driver.
And so I would make traffic stops, but my main goal was always to have interactions with people. That was the driver. It was like, well, I was not a huge ticket guy, like especially for traffic. I would always try to modify behavior and correct things, but I wasn't. It was more of making contact with people, making sure that there wasn't something else that was more urgent or dire, they were. And so that was kind of my life as a patrolman. In that, being in the outdoor industry and being outdoors all the time, like I have a probably an unhealthy relationship with firearms. Like I absolutely love them. I collect them. I know. Well, we've had the conversation. So that led to, again, going back into the teaching stuff where I ended up going down to the academy and getting specialized training in use of force and firearms. And I've held that certification with the state for most of my career. And what that looks like is I would always, there's a standard that we have to, as law enforcement in the state of Wyoming, you have to meet the standard and pass the test. So I was always training new people, or actually doing remedial training with some of the old people and trying to get them up to the new standard. And so that's always been something I've always enjoyed is firearms, any type of firearm or discipline with firearm, whether it's from shooting long range competitions to shooting pistols to shooting shotguns, which I can't, but I still like shooting them. And so really that was the big motivation behind becoming a firearms instructor. With that comes a use of force instructor. So you are, you're tasked with training people when they can apply and when they cannot apply force directly through, the Fourth Amendment and et cetera. So that's kind of in a nutshell what I've done and as a patrolman. Fast forward, there was a position opened in the schools. Back then we had a school resource officer position. And at this point in my life, I had Grant was 3 and Garrett was just born. And so working shift work and working nights and everything else is not as conducive to just a consistent family life. Yeah. And so, and I do feel like, my dad and my mom were both teachers, right? And so I feel like that some of that just was naturally, I guess, just passed along. But I thought, man, that'd be an interesting and challenging different aspect of the job. So I applied for that position and went through the testing process for that and was offered that position. With that came a whole different set of rules and training and like what that looks like. And also became a DARE instructor and would teach 3rd grade, 5th grade, and 7th grade students in the school districts and in the schools in Johnson County. But the shift in like your approach to law enforcement is different when you're in that setting. I always looked at it as 2 primary things. One, the safety and protection of the school that I'm in, the safety and protection of them from primarily an active shooter. That was always my focus. And second, have the ability to have, well, in law enforcement terms, we call it community-oriented policing. And that is giving law enforcement and the public opportunities to have a positive interaction. Law enforcement is reactive in nature. Like we can't just go to a call and, there has to be an action for us to react to, especially in use of force. And I'm not just going to show up at somebody's house and just like, well, I'm just going to start sifting through his stuff and seeing if he's got, dope. That's not how it works, right? We have to have reasons and probable cause and articulable suspicion and stuff like that to actually go through it. So, perfect example. I'm not going to go to somebody's door and knock on their door and say, how's the marriage tonight? I'm going to show up when we get a 911 call from the neighbor that says there's a lot of screaming and yelling and fighting going on at this residence, right? And so that's kind of just, it's reactive in nature. The flip side of that coin. And so I spent 6 years doing with that mindset, and going into the schools, it shifted to being a community-oriented police officer. And there's no better way to have a positive interaction with a law enforcement officer than as a school resource officer. I mean, I had, 100, 150 positive interactions with students and staff every day I went to work. I dealt with, thefts and bullying and, MIPs, tobacco and stuff like that. But overall, I mean, my job was just because people are you're going to get naturally persuaded, whether it's through actual meeting somebody in law enforcement, just like I was persuaded by that one cop, Yeah. I mean, at that moment in my life, I was like, this guy's a jerk. Like I'm not denying the fact that I was speeding, but I'm going to argue that I don't need to be talked down to. Right. And so that was my perception of law enforcement prior to being in law enforcement. Now I can tell you, sitting on the other side of that table and actually trying to enforce laws, I can see how people get a little frustrated with mankind.
Yeah.
And so,
well, yeah, there's an argument to be made that just like most people, their interaction with law enforcement isn't positive because they've done something wrong. Yep. It's reactionary. With law enforcement, your primary interaction with people is someone who has done something wrong. You don't get to interact on a regular basis with the upstanding citizen that's serving their community. Yeah. You interact with someone that has broken a law.
Yeah, and I mean, I doubt you've ever woke up one morning, Eric, and the birds are chirping and life is just good. And it's like, man, I just need to call the police department and tell them about how great a day I'm having, right? It just doesn't, it's just not how it works. You're always calling because there's something going on. And that kind of ties into like my principle in how I've always approached law enforcement is that it might not be an emergency to me because I come to work and I deal with emergencies, right? But I always kept telling myself no matter how mundane or how silly this is their emergency. If they picked up the phone and they called for law enforcement in their life at that moment, they feel like they need help. And so even before I'd get to the call, I was always trying to talk myself out of like, oh, this is going to be dumb. This is just another monotonous call, blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? I mean, that was kind of the speech I'd give myself. Like, okay, I understand that you can probably step into this space, come up with a resolution and fix their problem in, maybe under 3 seconds because it's not a problem, but it's a problem to them. And it's always about people's perception. And so, just tying back into my first interaction with that cop, that's the approach that I've always tried to bring to the table with every interaction I've had with people in law enforcement. And so that's kind of always been a big driver or thing that's in my mind is it might not be in my emergency, but or an emergency to me. It might not rise to that level, but it's theirs. And so, I think it just shifts my brain a little bit into being a little bit more compassionate, a little bit more understanding. In policing in Buffalo, Wyoming, and Johnson County is it's a huge opportunity to be more than just writing tickets and going on. I mean, there's, I have friends in law enforcement all throughout the state and other states, and you get into some bigger populations, and you show up, get on the computer, there's 6 calls pending, and you just start, and you just go from one to one. So you're looking at trying to find a resolution, shut it down, find a resolution, shut it down. And in Buffalo, you have the opportunity to show up, listen, and try to maybe help. I mean, be more of a service, not just, show up, be the hammer, all right, this is it. Like, so we've got XYZ, this probable cause, this guy goes to jail. Okay, we're done. Like, move on about your day. And so it really affords you the opportunity to get to try to listen and come up with a resolution that's fair and obviously statute based decisions. Yeah. But yeah, there was, this is a random call. I don't remember. There was a lady that had called 911, and I was the only officer on. It was probably 3:30 in the morning, 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. They had at least one officer at that time that'd work 24-hour coverage, and then we'd have people on call out if you needed them. And so we get 911 call, and this lady's just hysterically crying, and the dispatcher can't get anything out of it. And so I go flying up to the house. I black out, a block away because I don't know what's going on. So I'm kind of making more of a tactical approach to the house to hear, whatever, try to gain some intel on what the heck's going on in the house. And, I go up, all the lights are off, but I can hear this woman just sobbing in the house. And so I knock on the door, announce myself, and she came out and she's like, "Can I talk to you?" And I said, "Yeah, what's going on?" So I'm trying to pry, like, is there an emergency? Is there an issue? I mean, is there someone bleeding? Is there someone hurt? Is there, all of the things. And fast forward, she was mad because her husband had made a comment about her aging body and her looks, and how she didn't feel like he loved her anymore. Now, perfect example. Like, here's the thing. There's not a state statute for that, right? It's not, you can show up and you're like, okay, that sounds great. Let's get you some mental health services and I'm out. Right. But there's no mental health service to call out at 3:30 without waking up, multiple people. And this woman just needed someone to sit, listen to her. And I remember sitting on that porch. I drive by the house and I can remember the house. I cannot remember the person's name. I can't remember what she looked like. I remember just sitting there and just letting her talk, and just, it was a 45-minute call, and I just sat there and it kept getting, Buffalo 6 status. Like, I'm 10-4, everything's fine. Like, there's no urgency. There's no crime. But perfect example, at 4:15 in the morning, what else do I have better to do? I mean, I can go back and drive around circles and drink coffee, but this woman needed somebody just to hear her in that moment. And that was that's one of those calls that just stood out, that, it's, thank God that we live in Buffalo, Wyoming, and law enforcement does still have the opportunity to maybe step into that role for one of our residents.
I mean, law enforcement is supposed to serve and protect. You get to step into that service role a little bit more.
Yeah, we write it on the sides of our cars, but that's it. You can actually apply that as well. And in bigger agencies, sometimes that might get diluted, not because of out of necessity. I mean, you're going from protect to deal with this issue to deal with issue, and so you don't have that. You don't have 30 minutes to sit on somebody's porch and just hear. And so, yeah, it's an awesome community, and I do. I've loved serving Johnson County in that capacity, in my career.
That's awesome. Well, in that same vein, are there any other funny, scary, exciting stories that you've experienced in your time in law enforcement that you might be able to share with us?
That's a loaded question. Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot of different stories. So I was asked that question back in 2000 and maybe 14. I don't know. I was voted the police officer of the year for our county, and
an award you've won twice, I believe.
Yep. And so I was, back in the day, they'd bring you up and, you never know if you're going to get it or not. So it's kind of improv. And I remember walking up on the stage and they asked me that very question, like, tell us a quick story about your, this year and what, give me a case. And I was working at that time, and it still is the most egregious child sexual abuse case that I'd been, and I had completely consumed my career in this. And I'll tell that story. But they asked me that, and I'm like, I can't answer any of that. Like, I can't talk about the things that like the interview that I just did. I can't talk about any of these things. And the only thing that came out, and people still make fun of me today. I said, well, I caught a badger, and they're so stupid. There was a badger downtown. It's middle of summer. And so I'm an outdoorsman, right? And I've trapped and everything else. So I'm like hey, Adrian, there's a badger out there. So they were painting the mural at the square. And this badger was hissing and mad. And the artist was like on the scaffolding and called and said, there's a badger that won't let me get off the scaffolding. So I show up. We have an animal control officer at the time. And she is like, I mean, I can deal with cats, I can deal with dogs, but I mean, and so I'm like, we'll figure this out. And so then I like assess the environment, and I'm like, I've got no less than 50 tourists. I mean, this is in the middle of July, super busy. Everyone's heard the commotion. So now I have a very captive audience of how I address this badger. And so I went over there, and I got Karen was the animal control officer at the time. I got the catch pull, and I got this badger kind of cornered and threw the catch pull on it and tightened it up. And believe it or not, a badger can literally I swear it can turn inside out.
Oh, badgers are incredible. Everybody thinks they're like, friendly little critters, but oh man, the claws, the teeth, the mobility, the strength on those things, they're kind of terrifying.
He was fairly agitated when I got there, and then I tried to, I put a catch pull around his neck, which he completely pulled out of, but he knew the game at that point. And so I could only imagine watching that unfold. Long story short, I ended up catching the badger with the catch pull, putting it and putting in the animal control officer car, and we drove it outside of town and dropped it off. But I tell that story because that was the one that was going through my mind, right? And so being in a small community, I get to catch badgers, but in the same moment, like in the same part of my career, I'm working a case where the guy had already been convicted of 2 child sexual assaults. We had a report of another one, and it was one of those I've seen a lot of bad, but it was the hardest and worst case that I've ever worked. So as I was talking about being a school resource officer, there's another part that I found that one, I was in law enforcement, so I was an authority figure, but I was also a trusted adult, right? I'm teaching hundreds of kids DARE and just walking down the halls, and like, it's kind of cool. Like, you're kind of like the grandpa of the school, like your job is just to like knuckle people and high five and just have fun and just have a positive interaction. And so
I know you really leaned into that and did hunter safety with the kids, and really tried to create some opportunities for them to engage with you and engage in the outdoors, a passion that you had. And
firearm safety, like there's just a huge component that that I feel like that's something that needs to be taught, whether you are an advocate with firearms or not, man. Just having a knowledge of, hey, this is the bad end of the gun, and this is what a trigger looks like, and just trying to encourage kids, like, if you find a firearm, don't touch it. Like, if you don't know what you're doing, don't touch it. And even if you do know what you're doing, make sure that follow basic firearm safety rules and keep that muzzle pointed in a safe direction at all times. So really, I felt like that was a great opportunity for me just to get that message out and hopefully alleviate whatever. So
I do the Eddie the Eagle with all of my kids.
Yeah.
Stop, don't touch, run away, tell an adult. Sorry, I interrupted you there. You were talking about being a trusted person for the students in the school.
I think that just naturally came along with the territory. But with that, like, it just seemed like consistently I'd have kids would report things to me and think, like, hey, can I talk to the Officer Keeler? So we'd, and, that opened up a kind of my eyes wide open to, that our, the vulnerable in our community need protection and they need help. And, I dealt with some cases like that, but it really it ramped it up because now it was something that, and they're very hard cases to want to walk through with people and also to, extract truth and then have consequences for. So that really, I started going down that path of being involved in about everything that was juvenile related in Buffalo and Johnson County, because we have a child sexual assault, like a task force essentially that is comprised of sheriff's deputies and PD officers, county attorneys, Department of Family Services, and instead of having to talk to a kid 4 times or 5 times with a counselor and everybody else about, the worst experience they've ever gone through, it's hey, as adults, let's get together, come up with a plan, have a forensic interview, have the survivor tell their story one time, and we can share information like adults. And so that really it's been huge because you work as a team. It's more of a team approach on some pretty gnarly stuff. So why I got into that, and I will never, like, I guess if I had a calling or a purpose in law enforcement, it is to protect vulnerable people, to kids and vulnerable adults. Like, and I'll never forget that case that I was talking about, the bad one. I'll never forget sitting with the victim. She was an 8-year-old, and you could tell she had a story to tell, and she was, was just scared, didn't know how to say it, didn't know what to do. And I remember sitting with the DFS agent that I was working with, and at a table kind of like us, and she had actually got up and she'd crawled down underneath the table, and she was just balled up, like, and just would talk to us but didn't want to make eye contact, and just her body language was, I mean, fast forward and go through a lot of training, it's an absolute correct response for someone that's been through a significant trauma. And I always remember the DFS agent that I was working with said, we're people that you can talk to and you're trusted. And Adrian's a cop and he can keep you safe. And I haven't thought about this or verbalized it in years, but that little girl crawled over and she sat on my right foot and she latched onto my leg, and I could just feel her whole body shivering. And I looked down at that girl and she said, "You can keep me safe." And I looked her in the eyes and I said, "I promise I'll keep you safe." Mm-hmm. And at that point, I wasn't going to break that promise. I was not going to break that promise to that girl. And I went to the ends of the earth to keep that promise. Fast forward, I did. And, the gentleman went to prison and actually went to the Wyoming Supreme Court and it was upheld there. And so that moment was a defining moment in my career. And at that moment, I said, this is what I'm supposed to do. Nobody wants to wade through that stuff. It's just messy. It's nasty. You don't want to hear about that stuff. You don't want to have to, really, it's one of those things that as a culture and as a society, it's easier to just, well, if it's not blatantly in my face, then I can just kind of not, I know it's there. I know it's a part of society. I know it's a part of humans, but I also know that I don't really want to dive into that and figure it out. And I was the same way. But I tell you, that moment completely changed the trajectory of my career and my resolve to, all of a sudden, pulling somebody over for going 6 miles an hour wasn't important to me. All of a sudden, I still did those things, but it became kind of, well, God used that moment, put me right where he needed to be, and shifted my mind and my heart. And I also learned that I never make promises anymore. I mean, that's, I tell them I try my best. I'll do whatever I can. I'm going to try to keep you safe. I'm going to do, and all those things, but doesn't change how I approach the case, but it definitely changed. I just wasn't going to break my word to that little girl. And fast forward, I see her once in a while. She's a young adult. And to see her flourishing, I guess, in society, and also know the amount of evil that she endured just makes I just thank God that he used me in that capacity,
Yeah. Huh. One of my favorite questions I like to ask people is, what is their favorite and least favorite aspect of their job? I have a feeling those two things probably overlap for you.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's the wading through some really, really tough stuff with people, and I absolutely hate it. I hate to see some of the things that people endure, and there's a time where you just feel like, man, am I going to make a difference, or whatever. Maybe I watched too many John Wayne movies when I was a kid, and it's like, man, I'm going to step in and just and solve the problem and fix all of this and wrap it up in a 30-minute episode, but the reality of it is it's real people, and it's different when it's something to read or you see on the news and you see things. But when you're in the middle of it and it's your job to try to keep that survivor, I don't like to use the word victim, but that survivor of a child sexual assault or something, to help protect them, to keep them safe. I mean, I hope it doesn't sound cliche, but that truly is my motivation for why I'm still in law enforcement today.
You stepped into another question I had on my list here. I think law enforcement is one of those jobs or one of those careers that people probably think they understand, but the average person probably really has no idea what you do or what you experience, what it's really like. What is something that you would like the average person to understand about the life of a law enforcement officer?
We're, at the end of the day, we're all people, right? And so there's going to be, and oftentimes you're set to make decisions with just the information that you have at that moment, right? We're not, and sometimes there's wrong decisions to be made or that are made, but in those dynamic moments where things are rapidly evolving and the wheels are coming off the bus and you have, a half a second to make a decision, and then you have to stand by that decision or live with that decision and potentially get critiqued by the rest of the community or an attorney or whatever. I mean, it's definitely a tough job. And I'm thinking of like big picture stuff, like national news stuff right now when we're talking about that. And in Buffalo, I feel like we are, in Wyoming, I feel like we are at least 10 years behind that trend of, the anti-law enforcement thought process. So, and I'm thankful for living in Johnson County and living here, because the people, there's still people that support law enforcement, and it is a tough job. And being a first responder, whether you're, an EMT or a fireman, or being the on-call mental health worker that has to come out and sit with a mom that just lost their son or child, some pretty tough stuff to sit through. And so I'm not going to say it's a thankless job, because it's not. I mean, there's a lot of people that come up to me and say, thank you. And there's a lot more, just like you said, there's a lot more that goes into it. I mean, you're filtering through, decisions that you're making through, the Constitution. You don't want to make a poor decision that, because we live, whether you agree or not with our society, my stance is that it's still the best society in the world. We still have the ability to say what we want to say. We still have the ability to have firearms. We still have the ability to not just have a cop show up and kick down your door and go through your stuff. Mm-hmm. And, that's pretty good, because there's a lot of places in the world that absolutely happens. And you have to filter decisions through that matrix. You have to filter decisions through the safety of you. You have to filter those decisions through the safety of others. So there's a lot of things, a lot of dynamics that are going on, even on a traffic stop. Yeah. I mean,
that was something you said to me a few years ago that kind of turned that light on for me. Was there'd be a few incidents in the news at that time where somebody got pulled over for a routine traffic stop and pulled out a concealed firearm and started firing at the officer pulling him over. And I think we were talking about body armor at the time. And you said, for the person getting pulled over, that's a pretty routine interaction. You broke a traffic law, you get pulled over, you get a warning, you get a ticket, you know what to expect from the officer. They may or may not be rude to you, but it's a routine thing. And for the officer conducting that incident, that pulling that person over, there's a 99.9% chance it's a routine thing. Yep. And there's the 0.1% chance that person you pulled over is doing something more than a simple traffic stop. There's something more illicit going on, and your life is on the line.
So right, if you're caught flat on your feet, you don't get to go see your kids. Yeah. Your kids have to, your wife has to bury you. Like, that's a certain weight that, and the idea that it can't, happen here. Again, we have a phenomenal community. We have a phenomenal state, I'd say, overall. But I mean, just yesterday, we had an active shooter in Baggs, Wyoming. Like, population, 600?
Yeah.
Maybe. So, I mean, demographically, I guess what I've always said is, like, yes, we live in a very safe community. We live in a phenomenal community with a good moral backbone and kind of compass, but there's still people involved. And that's the reality. I mean, Baggs, Wyoming, 600 people, just shot a deputy, ended up in a high speed chase. I can't speak to that because I don't know all the details, but I do know a deputy was injured. And, so there may.
Yeah. And that's a level of stress, a level of, it brings a new perspective to those interactions. Most of the time when the average typical law-abiding citizen has an interaction with law enforcement, it's a pain, it's a hassle, they didn't enjoy it. I often hear people, comment about how the law enforcement officer was a little too aggressive or, whatever. And what most people, I think, don't get, or what was open, my eyes were open to that day with you explaining that, is like that door is always open. Like, the person getting pulled over doesn't ever think the deputy's just going to whip out their gun and shoot them. Like, they don't have to deal with that stress. And you have to be prepared for that eventuality. You have to deal with that stress. You have that weighing on you. And yet you also have to conduct yourself in a way that is reasonable for the average law-abiding citizen that was speeding a little bit.
Yep.
And that's a heavy dynamic.
It's definitely unique for sure. And I can't imagine, I don't know of any other profession where that's your day-to-day interaction. Mm-hmm. I mean, obviously I've you go to work and you have 10 interactions with people, and so a lot of people, the perception that I've heard in the past is like, man, he was really aggressive, or he was like, we were standing outside.
Why are you walking up with your hand on your gun?
Yeah. Or yeah, but in that scenario, you get called to, I'll just use one that I've been to. Ben is, you get called to a bar fight. You see a guy that matches the description. It's wintertime in Buffalo. He has a Carhartt coat on. He has both his hands in his pockets, right? And we're walking up. I'm cold too, but I mean, the very first thing I'm going to do is, I'm not going to say, hi, my name's Officer Keeler. I'd love to chat with you. I'm saying, show me your hands. Like, get your hands out of your pockets. Let me see your hands. And every time they go back to reaching into their hand pocket, you're like, why? What's in there? I mean, so they're just that simple command of like, I want to deal with the situation. I need to be able to, again, in my mind, show respect, not talk down to this person, and also try to mitigate the chances of me getting harmed or other people around them. And so, yeah, it's a dance for sure of trying to work that every day. And then you go home and there's just the one thing that I would say that I would like a big takeaway for law enforcement or people to know about law enforcement is that it being in that like type of alertness or preparedness and still be able to, lean across the tailgate and talk with somebody, but still have that part of your brain that's like, okay, like we're talking about things where everything's going fine, but I still need to be, paying attention to body language. I need to be paying attention to his hands. I need to be paying attention to all these things because, well, it could happen. You never know what's going to happen. And so just that cycle in your brain, I mean, it's fatiguing. It really is. I mean, a 10-hour shift, and every person that you see, and I know every law enforcement officer that's listening to this will know exactly what I'm talking about. But I mean, you go out to a restaurant and it is back to the wall. You're sitting there trying to talk to your family, talk to the kids, but you are scanning it is like system overload. Like there's like, oh, there's a guy over there. He's looking at, he made eye contact. There's this, there's that, who's this. And so in your head, that never really shuts down. You're just it's not paranoia. It's it's awareness that bad things happen and it could happen to you at any moment. And so you live your life in that, it's the only time that I think for myself personally, when I kind of could just let that guard down was when I was out in the middle of nowhere or in my house with my family. And I'd already made a security check, make sure everything's locked. And I know where all my firearms are. You know what I mean? Like it's not really gone, but it's, you can just finally, okay, sit down, eat popcorn, watch a movie and hang out with the family. So yeah, definitely a interesting thing to put your mind through, on repeat for 20 or 15, 30 years, whatever your career ends up being. So
yeah. Well, yeah, we've talked about firearms a few times. That was one of the areas you and I connected early on. We both, I think you called it an unhealthy affinity for firearms. I would argue that, but for the gun guys out there, the gear geeks, can you tell us a little bit about kind of what your loadout is as a sheriff's deputy? What kind of a weapon do you carry? What kind of weapons do you have access to? What does your uniform look like as far as tools outside of weapons or body armor, that kind of thing?
So a handgun, 9mm, and have a patrol rifle, shotgun. As an investigator now, I carry just a handgun primarily with me, and I'm usually dressed in, business attire or something to that. But if I'm going to an urgent call, like I have, my vest with all the rest of my gear, my kit on it that I can put on, and I always do that before I get to something. So if I'm getting called out, or if I'm going to serve a search warrant, or if I'm going to, do anything that's more high risk, I guess that's when I've just put my vest on. It has my, taser and all the other cool gadgets on it. So.
Okay. If you are elected sheriff, is there any changes you would make to the equipment or the gear that your deputies would be issued?
I mean, there's always things that you would want to maybe improve, but really, again, being the firearms instructor, like I have a pretty, as far as the weapon systems are concerned, like I was pretty influential in our decision making process, so I'm standing behind them. Like I'm thinking we did a pretty good job, you know. But I mean, as far as gear is concerned, there's always, I mean, just wear and tear on vehicles and trying to keep, you know, our taser systems up to date, and you know it's just all costs money and everything. Just like everything else in the world, everything keeps becoming inflated. But yeah, is there probably higher speed, newer things out there? Yeah, but I feel like we are adequately, you know, geared up for most situations that we're going to be tasked to deal with. So
yeah. Well, you just mentioned, you know, tasers and advancement of technology and things there. How you've had 20 years in law enforcement, how have you seen things change in the law enforcement world over those 2 decades of service?
Oh, yeah, it's a bunch. You know, prior to when I started, and tasers might have been invented, but they were not on every cop. I remember when we got our first one, we didn't have the budget to buy multiple tasers, so we had to trade them out every shift. So that's just one thing that I've seen. You know, the FTO program, like I mentioned earlier, I ended up while I was working with the police department, I became an FTO trainer, went to specialized training for that, and came back and actually had a standardized like platform that. Like I wanted to make sure that before we sent you out and made you have to make those split-second decisions that we were talking about, that 1, you're proficient with your firearm. 2, you are proficient in being able to understand use of force and when it cannot be applied, and you know, basic tactics and things like that. Because I dove into that, really trying to teach that in that capacity for the police department. Report writing stuff. I mean, you
don't use a notepad and pencil anymore?
No, that used to be on this is prior to my time, but I remember going through old cases and it was on you know, little cards. Like it was, and reports were essentially like, on this time in this date observed so and so driving erratically, made traffic stop, he was drunk, arrested. Like, I mean, it was like, all right, like we covered the bases, I guess. And, you know, and right now, you know, everything is definitely scrutinized. I would say a little bit more than that.
Yeah, I was going to say you went from that to body cams that record everything.
Yeah. So definitely an evolving, you know, space as far as techniques and equipment. And so,
yeah. What are the biggest threats, issues, or problems that you see in our community or our culture today? What are the things that are kind of on your radar that you're thinking about as potentially being the sheriff and the chief law enforcement officer in the county? What are you on the lookout for?
You know, I guess big picture things that I see is that, I mean, the scare of illegal, you know, narcotics, for example, they're not made here. They're all brought here, right? And so trying to figure out how to push back against that is definitely an uphill battle. I mean, we have, you know, fentanyl and methamphetamine use and just the gamut of it. It's, again, there's people involved. So it's no different than Denver or Billings in a sense. It's just on a way smaller scale, right? So, but we still have, I mean, we have have a great working relationship with surrounding counties, surrounding agencies, other task force members, department, DCI, and so working in I guess in conjunction and harmony with those other agencies really helps us or allows us to push back in that area. Again, the thing that's been so close to me and the things that I walk through most of the time are crimes against children and crimes against vulnerable adults. And so that really is where my focus has always been. And I would say asking me that question, that's where my eyes are focused. Asking, one of the other deputies, the undersheriff, for example, works and assists a lot with a lot of our dope or narcotics cases. And so I know that's kind of the arena that he really is. If you asked him that question, that would be his priority, or not priority, but his perception of the things that we can see in the community.
So how is your job or your viewpoint going to change given that you get to see different aspects, different problems than other people in the department, moving into the sheriff position where you're responsible for all of it? What do you anticipate that change being like, or how are you going to maybe adapt to being able to see the whole picture rather than the areas that you've been focused on?
It's just kind of a broader view, right? It's just you're take a step back and look at the big picture, and you're going to have to look at, there's a lot of state statutes out there, right? And so there's a lot of so you have to have a really vast knowledge base of what is a crime and what isn't a crime. And my main intent behind running for sheriff is to be able to pass along the knowledge that I have to the next generation of law enforcement, because I'm not going to be doing it when I'm 72 years old. Right. And so I think that's kind of the big vision for me, is to pass along not only the knowledge, but the desire to step into that place, like have them have that moment when I had that moment where I said, I'm drawing a line right here, and I'm not going to I'm going to push back in every capacity I can against this part. But you also have to be just approachable and open and be able to, you're going to be dealing, as an investigator, I deal with child crimes, but I've done a lot. I've done white collar crimes, in the millions of dollars. I've done felony level thefts. I've done livestock thefts. I
know a couple years ago, I gave you a call and you were on a stakeout for a narcotics thing when we were chatting on the phone. So, I know your experience is pretty broad.
Yeah. And so I do have a broad understanding of everything. When I keep going back to the child stuff, I'm telling you that it was that moment, that defining moment of me that's just where, it shifted something in me, and I'm completely comfortable in doing a gamut of other investigations, but that was and so, yeah, I've had narcotic felonies. I've dealt with, like I said, white collar crime, thefts, livestock
husbands
thefts.
That don't find their wives attractive anymore.
Yeah. Not a crime, but it was definitely I've kind of segued out of a lot of that. Most of the stuff that we get are, all the death investigations. You go through those and try to figure out, well, so you have to approach that with the same level of intensity if you going into it as if you knew why it happened, right? So if you have an unattended death, I'm going to go through the procedure, the process to be able to figure out what occurred and why.
Yeah.
And so
I think a big role of leadership is mission and vision. And it sounds like you have that in spades for your own career and are excited to share that with the rest of the department and the next generations of finding that mission and vision of how they can serve and protect.
Oh, absolutely. The other aspect is that I really want to make sure that the department still continues to play well with others. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
We have such a unique position in the state of Wyoming. I do not know of any other agency in Wyoming where the police department and the sheriff's office work under the same roof, let alone work together. And I've talked with a lot of different agencies throughout the state, and they're just absolutely floored that we can work cohesively like that. And it's not just between our two departments, but we assist the Highway Patrol. I've during one of my investigations, ended up writing a search warrant for a game and fish violation, and worked alongside with game and fish. I've worked with U.S. Forest Service. I've worked with the FBI. And so, I have fostered, and the department as a whole has fostered a lot of positive interaction with multiple state and federal level law enforcement agencies. And at the end of the day, it just gives us more tools in our tool belt, and it to help provide safety and protection to our communities.
Is there an opinion you once held strongly that you've changed because of your experience?
Well, going back to the traffic stop when I was in high school, my opinion of that officer, I would say, I guess I don't agree with how he treated me, but I can tell you that I have a better understanding of the things that he might have been going through during his day, So, and so I guess, I can just see that being a big one for me.
Okay. What mistake have you made that you learned the most from?
Like career oriented? Is that what we're talking about, or life oriented?
I'm good either way.
It's hard to narrow it down. Like I have an understanding that I'm human and I'm going to make mistakes, and I'm always trying to take those mistakes and learn from them. I mean, and try to modify the next outcome, and that's the hard thing. Law enforcement is nothing's exactly the same. You can have a traffic stop, for example, but very oftentimes it's not the same person. And if it is the same person, it's not the same day. And even if it is the same day, you don't know what's occurred in their life between those times, right? And so you can kind of formulate like, okay, these are the things that worked, these are the things that didn't work, and I'm going to use that knowledge to help promote a better outcome for that problem. The next time something similar that comes up, it's hard to narrow it down to one, because I feel like I'm learning every day. Like I've never not just said, oh, I got this figured out. Check, moving on to the next thing. Right. Yeah. And so, it's hard for me to speak to one specific thing, because it's just a continuing loop of, hey, I did this and I did this well and it worked out. So I'm going to file that into do that again. And I did this, it didn't work out well. And I'm going to file into don't do that again. And if I'm not going to do that again, what can I do to have a positive outcome? And that's just how I approach everything. I mean, from parenting to going and buying lunch. I mean, if I go to buy lunch and I don't like the flavor of something, I'm not going to order that again. Right. And so, it's a continual loop in my life of always learning.
Yeah. That's one of the things, like I mentioned earlier, we've been friends for a long time. And one of the things that I've always appreciated about you is that humility and humble spirit. And you never have been the guy that thinks he has all the answers. You've always been the guy that's made all the mistakes and has a lot of wisdom from it. And I appreciate that. I think you look at pretty much everything you do as what could have gone better, how could I improve this, and rather than getting stuck in a rut of, to use your example, the traffic stops. Well, okay, all of them go bad, so I'm just gonna be mean, be gruff, be condescending, but yet you always reflect on it and try to find a way to make it better. So,
or on the flip side of that, I've seen officers where they spend the first 30 minutes of their shift or whatever watching videos on the internet of traffic stops that have gone bad, right? And then you're showing up to the table with that, and all of a sudden you might not want to make traffic stops, right? Because you've just conditioned your brain that cop gets pulled over and gets caught flat-footed and it loses his life. I mean, and that's all over. I mean, it's all over the internet, and trying to find that happy balance of like, okay, and knowing that this is an option, this could happen. I need to be prepared physically, mentally, with my tools to be able to protect myself or people around me or whatever, and still walk up to the door and be approachable and, be a guy that they walk away and say, well, he might have gave me a ticket, but not a bad guy.
Yeah.
I've actually had some people that I'm arrested for felony level stuff that have reached out to me. And these are the things that I wasn't prepared for when I threw my name in the arena. But they said, man, as you know, I'm a felon, can't vote for you, but if I could, I would. And because the way you didn't talk down to me, you treated me with respect and dignity through it. And I'm telling you what, that's a sense of pride for me that I do have. It's like, you know what? I set this goal 20 years ago. And to me, that takes a lot of selflessness on that person's part to be able to say, hey man, like, you treated me all right. I did bad things, but through the process, I was treated like a human being, and I appreciate you for that. Like, getting comments like that just texts like randomly when you put yourself out in the all of a sudden find myself in the political arena. Like, that's a conversation I would have never had. You're right. But, so that was an eye-opening interaction, and just having, and having not just one, but multiple people, say, hey, dude,
I've even before you decided to run for sheriff, we've experienced that together. I've been out with you and people have come up and, hey, yeah, this guy arrested me. And, he's a great guy. You definitely have respect for the people that you've interacted with, even if that's in a negative manner.
Oh, that was always, again, that was at the very beginning of my law enforcement career. That was one of the goals that I set for myself, was like, and I haven't been perfect. I haven't. I guarantee you there's some people that are listening to this right now and say, well, he wasn't all that nice to me that day. But I can tell you the intent there, the heart was always there. Big picture stuff. That was always one of my drivers, was to do that. So.
Yeah. And I know you told the story about kind of getting into law enforcement, and that maybe reluctant isn't the right word, but it was, it wasn't your initial ambition, your dream, what you were headed for, but you kind of came into it through circumstances. I understand maybe this campaign and running for sheriff came about in a similar way. Do you want to speak to that at all? What inspired you or drove you to move from investigator to sheriff?
Sure. Well, again, I was just nose down doing my thing, working investigations, which is really what I enjoy the most. As far as the aspects of the job, like, they're complex. It's not, and so I really enjoy working through large, complex cases. It's rewarding to me. It helps me feel, and I feel like I'm big picture stuff, whether I'm doing it for that little girl that was sitting on my foot, or doing it from the victim that just was, that just lost $850,000 through an embezzlement, whatever the case is. Like, I feel like it's big picture stuff. And the reality is I'm not going to stop doing that. Like, if I become the sheriff, I'm still going to work. I just don't know in what capacity, but I'm not going to just step out of that role. Like, I'm a professional peace officer. And if a shift needs covered, or someone calls in sick, I've been there, right? I've had the 3-year-old and the 1-year-old at home, and the wife that is like, I am to my max, I need help. And if there's nobody else to do that, that's going to be my role. That's, as a leader, I think that's what you do, is you step in and I can't ask people to do anything that I wouldn't do. And so that's my big vision, is to still be a working sheriff, and still, because I can tell people, like, hey, do the X, Y, and Z. But if you say we get a felony level case, to be able to walk along or beside a deputy that might have 3 years of experience that's never worked a felony level case from beginning to end, like, just how's he going to learn that if there isn't somebody there to train or to pass that along? You can read cases, you can try to fumble your way through writing a search warrant, but it'd be silly if you have a man that has the knowledge and the ability to write a search warrant and walk you through that process. It's just an example. So I still feel like I'm going to be in that capacity to a certain degree. I understand there's a lot more dynamics in that seat, but I'm not going to just set down being a cop.
Yeah. So what was it that made you decide to run for sheriff?
Yep. So I was happy where I was at, and the sheriff, current sheriff, had kind of, probably 3 months ago, had told everybody like he was going to run for another term, and the overall, I think, takeaway was like, cool, like we'll just keep business as usual. And that decision shifted, and he came to us and said, I'm, for other reasons in my life, I'm not gonna run for sheriff. And that led to, not all the employees, but a group of employees sitting down, just kind of like shock, like, oh no, what's that look like next? What's that look like for the sheriff's office? What's that look like for the community? And so we all started pointing fingers, like, are you going to run? Are you going to do it? Someone needs to step up. So, and I had multiple people say, you should run for sheriff. And it just wasn't in my, that wasn't in my thought process at all. And the more, matter of fact, I told several people, like, if there's somebody else that is better suited, that the entire department can get behind and lead, then I'll back that person. And, I kept getting, no, that's you. Like, we will support you. And I, very plainly, I wouldn't want the job if I didn't have the support of the people there. Cause really it's hard to take something in a positive direction if you're fighting all your battles behind you. Right. And so I wanted to make sure, I'm sure there may be employees there that might not 100% be on board. I don't know. I guess they haven't come up and said that to me, but I've had an overwhelming majority of them come and say, I'd absolutely work for you and will work for you and continue to do the things that we're doing. So I went home, and again, I do what I always do. I retreated to the outdoors, because that's where I like when things get really, really bad, and I deal with it, and then I'm just like, bye, Kathy. Like, and so anyway, I was fishing and just thinking and processing through it, and like a lot of things in my life are always analogies, and I like the one analogy that kept popping into my head, and just so you know, I mean, there was a ton of prayer over it, and like just to check my heart, like check my motivations, check, just all of those things. And this is the analogy that kept popping into my head. Like, I just feel like we were sitting on a train, and the conductor just stood up and said, I'm no longer driving. And, I looked left, I looked right, and everyone's kind of looking left and looking right back at me. And in my mind at that point, I have three options. I can either sit down, learn how to drive, I can jump off the train, or I can sit right where I'm at and wait for the unknown, wait for a crash. And the only two proactive choices I have in that scenario is jump or to sit down and learn how to drive. And I'm just not ready to jump from law enforcement. I couldn't take that leap, and I just feel like this is absolutely what I've been called to do in a certain capacity, as far as being in law enforcement, and like I said, stepping in that gap and helping that girl and so many others. And it's been a fulfilling and rewarding part of my job, but I also feel like it's not a mistake that God led my life from fishing guide to law enforcement.
Yeah.
I do feel like he has used me in that capacity, and I don't feel like I'm being called to be not used in that capacity. So it was sit down, learn how to drive. And so that's what we're going to do.
Cool. Well, I know, you've had a few specialized roles in the police department and the sheriff's department. You've pursued a lot of additional education outside of just the police academy. You have thousands of hours of training in firearms and investigation and use of force and teaching. I know you and I have interacted. You listen to audiobooks and read some books. You've had some mentors in your life that have walked with you. What has been your best resource to grow as a leader?
Being around men that are leaders, paying attention to, because I've worked for bosses that are filling that role as my boss, but they're not a leader, and I've seen that in a couple of different areas of my life, but I think that to me is the biggest is learning and paying attention from leaders that have been influential in my life. They might not have had the title, but they were definitely leaders in their area. And I'm sure there's, when you're, in construction working crews, there's guys that might not be the foreman of that operation, but people naturally go to them because they're approachable, because they have the answer. Or if they don't know the answer, their pride will allow them to say, I don't know, let me go figure that out. Right. And so these are all natural traits to being a leader. And when you see that and actually see it play out, and it's not faked, it's not forged, it's true leadership. It doesn't matter what title you're at or what hat you're wearing. I pay attention because I've learned from leaders in every arena in my life.
Yeah. And it sounds like with the support of the department and your coworkers, it sounds like maybe you're one of those guys now that has the experience, the leadership that people come to.
I'll tell you what, what an honor. Believe it or not, the, law enforcement community with a bunch of type A personalities, we're not walking around just saying, man, you're just doing such a great job. Like, keep it up, buddy. Like,
you don't see that in construction very often. Either.
Yeah. It's just, frankly, if you like somebody, you just make fun of them. That's kind of and I'm sure construction's the same way, right? But actually to have, when the dust all settles and actually have people that I 100% admire and respect say, hey, like, I've been paying attention. I see you and I know that you have the abilities to do this job and I'll follow you. Like, what a humbling thing and it's honoring, but it's also like, you take that pretty serious. Like, I'm not going to squander that and I'm going to try to still live up to the same standard that they have for me. So,
yeah. So what advice would you have for a young person that wants to do what you've done, that wants to build a career in law enforcement and serve their community in that way?
Well, if you're driven to do that, don't start as a fishing guide. I would say go, you can go to college and get a associate's degree in criminal justice. I think that would be a huge leg up. Some people will come, we hire people from the military, but I think one of the biggest assets you can have, and I do feel like being a fishing guide absolutely set me up to succeed, is just to be able to interact with human beings, like be able to pay attention and not just what they're saying, but how they're acting, what they're doing, and being able to read kind of between the lines on some things when people say, yep, everything's fine. But every part of their body language is saying things aren't right. Like figure out how to pry that out, or not pry that out. That's not the right terminology, but to sit and be that person that they're willing to share those things with, whether it's sit down at 4:00 in the morning and talk to a lady that doesn't feel seen anymore in her home, to being able to sit down and talk to an 8-year-old that has gone through some horrific physical abuse or something, and just doesn't know if she can share that story, because I don't know if it's what's going to happen. If I speak to this and then you take it and you don't believe me, or you take it and you don't do your job, or if you take it and the system fails me, I have to go back to him. I have to go back to that environment. And so, yeah, I think having phenomenal people skills is probably the number one thing that I would say. And however you cultivate that in your life would be my encouragement.
Okay. Well, this is my favorite question that I ask of every guest. You've mentioned it a little bit, but are you a person of a particular faith tradition? And if so, how does that impact your career, your leadership?
For sure. Yeah, I'm a believer in Jesus Christ, and he absolutely saved my life. And I speaking about in those darker moments of my life, I was working on a ranch. So when I was guiding fishermen, I'd float down the river, and then I'd also guide on on a ranch south of Casper. And if I didn't have fishermen, I'd just do day ranch work. And I was working on a project with a gentleman, and like things would just happen like in our day. And whether it was the weather or whether it was people that like failed, or we forgot to get, the parts that were supposed to be shipped out to finish the task weren't there, just frustrations. And I just kept thinking, I'm like, it frustrated me, and I was just the sidekick, I wasn't, and he just always approached everything in just such a manner that was like, you know what? Well, he just approached every problem with like a phenomenal attitude and just grace to other people, and finally, like I got kind of frustrated. I'm like, something happened, and I was like, why is he not mad? Like, I'm mad that he's not mad. And so I just called him out on it, and I said, Grant, like, what is going on with you? And like, why is this happening? Like, I saw something in that man that I didn't understand, but I thought, man, how do I imitate that? How do I get that in my life? And that day, sitting out in Shirley Basin, Wyoming, on a project, I had the gospel of Jesus. I knew the Bible. I mean, I knew I could quote scripture. I'd been to church, but I had never seen that lived out, in a person so tangibly close to me, and see what actual grace really looked like when someone is shining that light in their lives, and I wanted it. And so, we just that started a long summer conversations about that. And I just started just digging into it, trying to figure out like, who is this Jesus guy? And like, but in the back of my mind, that's when I said earlier that I wouldn't change anything in my life, even my knee injury and all those things. Like prior to that, like my mind was like, I'm not the baddest guy. I'm not the worst guy in the world. Like I make, good decisions. I get decent grades. I don't do terrible things. I've never killed anybody. Like, I'm thinking to myself, like, hey, I'm winning. And my standard was always like, again, you can, if you feel like you're a C average or below in a certain area of your life, it's really easy to look at the people that are, getting Fs in that area, right? You don't look at the people that have B plus averages, right? So it's always easier to just to look and compare yourself how you want to sell it to yourself. And really in that moment, in that season of my life, I just really started questioning, like, man, if this God thing's real, and like it's not looking well for me. Like I have been a liar. I have been a thief. I have coveted other people's stuff. Like, I mean, you start going through the check boxes, and I'm like, it ain't looking good for you, Adrian. And I tell you, that's the profound mystery and the amazing beauty of Christ, is when you feel what love really feels like, and when that grace is poured on you. And so, yeah, that has definitely been a defining thing in my life. And I do try to filter things in my life through that lens first. And there's been times, and I've worked with people that, that are openly not Christian. And I've walked away from some calls, and I'm just like, I couldn't walk away from this. I couldn't do the job without having that faith, that knowing that there is a creator, that, and all things will work, glorify him and through him. So in my mind, there's things that I've seen and done that I just, and been a part of, that as a man, as a cop, as a dad, that you're just like, there's no possible way that good can come of this. It's just evil. But just knowing that, that he is ultimately sovereign over all of it, and you submit your life to Christ and trust and put your faith, put your trust in that, and not just by the words, but truly open-handedly put your trust in that. He loved that little girl hugging my leg more than I could. Mm-hmm. He loves that mom that lost their son to addiction more than I could. And I just feel like that's the filter that everything has to go through. It's like, I don't understand it. I don't know why, but that's why you're God and I'm not. And like, my job is to have faith and trust in you. And I'm not saying I succeed every day. I'm human. I still sometimes see a problem and just want to automatically, like, how can I strategize, or how can I do this to make it benefit what I think the outcome needs to be? And well, as soon as there's times where no matter how hard you're trying to do something, if it's not in the cards, if it's not God's timing or his will isn't behind it, it's not happening. Right. And there's a lesson to be learned from that too. And so.
Great. Sure. Well, that seems like a great place to kind of wrap things up. Before we go, is there anything you'd like to say to the audience or to future constituents?
Not really. I just thank you, Eric, for giving me the opportunity to come and speak with you. Like, it's been enjoyable to kind of walk through, just you get your day-to-day life. You don't really go back and try to extract things out of your past, that you're thinking about. So it's been awesome experience for me just to talk about it. And
great. Well, thank you for taking the time. I know, you're in a busy season of life with work and family and now a campaign. So I really appreciate you taking the time to share your story with us and learn a little bit more about law enforcement. And thank you guys for joining us here on From the Ground Up Show. Again, help me out. Take a moment, like, share, follow, subscribe on YouTube, your favorite podcast platform, and on social media. If you take a moment to leave us a 5-star review or leave a comment, that is really huge in helping promote the show, move it up in the algorithms. Don't forget to check out our merch store, shop.fromthegroundupshow.com. And until next time, keep grinding.